Adam, alcoholic. Ralph.
Go ahead, Ralph, alcoholic. Um,
Okay. Just wanted to, for the people that are just logging on for the first time, as a courtesy, I'm gonna just take about 5 minutes and briefly talk about everything we did up to this point. Uh, the whole point of this exercise, as I went through this with my sponsor, was to use the book as a tool to help an alcoholic kind of diagnose their own disease. Not so much the story, but the symptoms. The fact that they can't stop once they start, the fact that they can't stay stopped on their own, and then more about the spiritual malady. But just from where we started in the very beginning, very briefly, I have people I work with write the circle and the triangle in the cover page under where it says addition, how many men and women have recovered. I have them put in the table of contents where all the steps are. All of that is also in the the talks that we did a couple of weeks ago. Continuing through that, I have them highlight on the first preface that this is a basic text, which is like a college study guide. It is not a novel. It's basically a workbook. I have them highlight on the back of that preface where it says, yes, this happened to me. Yes, I felt like that. Do I believe this program will work for me? I ask them all of those questions. I ask them on the next page on the forward of the first edition. I show them the first promise, how we have recovered. And it says precisely, I have them highlight that. I have them highlight our way of living. And then I have them go into the forward to the second edition where it says, indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. All of that is I have them do that before I start in the doctor's opinion. And then these are going to be fundamentally the questions that I ask them. You can go back and listen to this afterwards and maybe write these questions into your book. So the questions out of the doctor's opinion are such as, am I regarded as hopeless? Do I want to quit, but I can't? Am I the type with every method I tried failed completely? Is there anything else I can do? Am I willing to rely on that this book has a remedy for me? That's a big stopping point. If they don't believe in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery outlined in the big book, it's very unlikely that they're going to stay with you all the way through this process. Going back through this, can I safely use alcohol or, for some people, drugs in any form at all? Did I form the habit? Could I break it? Do I drink or use because I like the effect produced by alcohol? Does this effect become so elusive that although I admit it's injurious, I cannot differentiate the true from the false? All of these are critical questions when you're working with someone to stop, ask the question, and let them respond to it. Because from my experience working with people, as they go through a process of discovery in their own life as they do this, and it really is the hook that's going to bring them to the conclusion that apart from some kind of divine help, they're probably doomed, that they have no, as we'll say later, effective mental defense against that first drink. So they go through the cycle of addiction or alcoholism that we talk about: drinking, craving, spree, emerging remorseful, swearing off forever. I ask them all of those questions. Was I over remorseful, making many resolutions, never a decision? This is for the chronic relapser. This is the guy that keeps going back because maybe there's something he missed. And although self-knowledge won't fix me, having a clear idea of what the problem is critical to understanding what the solution is. If I do not understand what the problem is, the solution's probably not going to work. If you're new, if the problem's alcohol, the solution's abstinence. It's simple. But if it's everything that the book is saying it is, that I have this restlessness in my spirit, this discontentment, and this irritability, if that's what drives me back to the obsession, and then the obsession to the allergy, and then the allergy kills me, I can see this cycle much more clearly. And you might be able to illuminate with them. So all of these are very critical. Can I start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving? Again, going through this chronologically as I'm going through the book, the buildup is to the place where I start to see that I'm doomed. Am I always going on the wagon for keeps? How many times did I break the pipe? How many times did I swear off forever, with or without a solemn oath? How many times did I say I was going to quit? Did a frothy emotional appeal work for me? All those questions are critical to get to a place where suddenly I start to understand that this is a life or death thing for many people that we have the privilege of working with. And I'm going to finish with that. Ralph's going to talk a little bit about Bill's story, and then we're going to go through that together. But having the doctor's opinion in place is a very, very important beginning. And that's why it was placed right before Bill's story, because it is a diagnostic tool in many ways that kind of really, I didn't like my liquor watered down. Why would I want my AA watered down? I don't want to be offensive, but these are like bullet point questions that I'm going to ask a newcomer. And if he answers those questions, and in the way that I did, it's not only frightening, but I get to a place where, am I willing to go forward with the rest of the book or not? So thank you. And if you're new, anything we can do, Ralph and I have given everybody our emails and our contact information. Anything in addition to this, we're available. And we're just a couple of guys. I can't talk for Ralph, but I'm just a guy that's done this with a lot of people over the years. And I'm really privileged. I'm not an expert. I'm just another person that works with people in the book. So like I said, we're available for questions. We'll open it up at the end of this also. So that's my 5 minutes. Go ahead, Ralph.
Ralph, alcoholic. Keeping with that thought about the diagnosis, I mean, just think about it. If you go to the doctors, you don't know what's wrong, and the doctor says, okay, this is what's wrong with you. You make that diagnosis. That's what we're talking about here, answering these questions to say, does this happen to me, particularly in this part of the book, when I take alcohol into my body? And later we're going to talk about when I'm stopped, the insane thought that we pick up that drink, that powerlessness. But just assuming you go to the doctor and he makes his diagnosis of you, he writes out a prescription. You go to the pharmacy, you fill the prescription, and then there's directions on the prescription. Take one every 4 hours. And that's the same thing we have here. We have the problem being talked about, the prescription, and then the program of action. And, it works for everyone, and we're going to be talking about Bill's story now, a little history about Bill. He's one of the co-founders of AA. He was born in 11/24/1995. He died in January of 71, so he died at 76, and he got sober when he was 39 years old. And I was told that when we read this, we don't look at the differences, that he was a stockbroker, that he was from New York, that he was a male, and he played golf. We just going to look at here, did I drink like that? Did I act like that? Did I feel like Bill? We're going to look for those consistencies. And this is filled with many questions. And a lot of you guys don't know, but he actually wrote out the first draft of his story. It was called Strange Obsession. It was actually 37 pages. And then they said, no, Bill, that's too long. You got to cut it back. And he cut it back to 26 pages. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of it because it was like more like a novel. It says, it was a hot night in midsummer of 1934. I found myself at a noted address in Central Park West, New York City. It was Charlie Towns Hospital for the drying out of alcohol. Sobering and sweating out of fearful hangover, I laid in bed upstairs room. Downstairs, the doctor looked across the table at my wife, Lois. She was saying, Doctor, why can't Bill stop drinking? And it goes on and on and on. And if anyone wants me to email it to him, I'd be more than happy to. Just put your email in the chat. But it's pretty interesting how he was still caught up in really, really self when he wrote this first draft. But anyways, here we go. Bill's story, page 1. War fever ran high in the New England town to which new young officers from Plattsville were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us into their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime, intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last. In the midst of this excitement, I discovered liquor. That's the first question when I'm working with a new guy, and when my sponsor asked me, he says, Ralph, when did you discover liquor? What was it like? Look at me. I'm a big guy. I love pizza. I don't remember my first slice of pizza, but I remember my first drink. We're continuing. I forgot strong warnings and prejudice of people concerning drink. Question mark. Did you have alcoholism in your family? Were guidance counselors, were mentors, were basketball coaches, were girlfriends warning you about your drinking? In time, I sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. That's another question mark. Ask yourself, did you ever turn to alcohol when you were lonely? We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a dog around an old tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking a cold small beer. A good soldier is never forgot, whether he died by musket or by pot. What was going on is he was in this cathedral and he was hearing the planes and all this horrific stuff that he had seen in the war. And he was really questioning whether God existed at all. And he had some moment. And when he wandered outside, he read this. Now, here he is 15 years later in the hospital when he wrote this later on, the real meaning of it, because it's about alcohol. When they're talking about pot, they're not talking about like the type you smoke. They're talking about a pot of beer. And you had to heat the beer up to kill the bacteria. If you didn't, you would die. Ominous warnings I failed to heed. Again, that's another question mark. 22 and a veteran of 4 wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for I had not men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. My talent for leadership, I managed, would place me at the head of a vast enterprise, which I would manage with the utmost security. He's thinking like big shotism. I took a law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. My work took me around Wall Street, and I made little, became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but for some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. That's a question mark there. Have you ever been too drunk to think or write? And you could see now the progression is starting to, have a little problems. Adam always talks about the 3 stages of drinking when it's fun, drinking with problems, and then just problems, Though my drinking is not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. Question mark. Again, we turn to the question marks. We had long talks when I would steal her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceived their best projects when drunk. The most majestic constructions of philosophical thoughts were so derived. Adam, why don't you tell the group about what happens when you drink a beer with someone, and then what happens when you do a line, and what happens when you do something else and something else and something else. How you go into business,
Oh yeah, the craving. But I want to go back just for 1 minute. You covered this beautifully, but one of the things that Harry Tebow said when he was very close to Bill Wilson, you can look him up. He's in the 3rd appendices of the book. Also a friend of Alcoholics Anonymous. He says the 4 qualities of an alcoholic are grandiose, sensitive, immature, and omnipotent, and kind of implies that those are our finer qualities. But going through Bill's story, very much like you just said, and taking, if you're new, a lot of times, and I've heard many other people talk about this, we get lost in the story sometimes. And one of the ways to look at Bill's story, again, is to look at the symptoms. We're going to look at the symptoms, and that's what Ralph's talking about. Like, once I start, I can't stop. How many times I said I was just going to have a drink and ended up beating on the bar again. But starting to look at these symptoms. Very interesting about Bill ignoring the strong warnings from his family. We have a saying in AA that genetics loads the gun, that dysfunction pulls the trigger. Bill knew that he had a genetic disposition to alcoholism. That's what it meant when they said strong warnings from his family concerning drink. The genetics was there. A lot of us have it. I come from a long line of suicide, alcoholism, and, probably bad behavior. So going through all of this, like Ralph had just said, Bill belonged. He wanted to belong. This thing about being the token of appreciation was a medal. He wanted to be recognized. These are all symptoms of this need to be acknowledged. It's part of humanity, but for us, it seems to be exaggerated. So going through all of these questions, again, like Ralph had said, do I drink? Do I think? Do I feel? Was I as hopeless as? Those are the questions. But then also going through this part of the book, if you're new, look at Bill's grandiosity. Look at his sensitivity. Look at Bill's emotional immaturity as we go through this. And look at his omnipotence, which is his fight against God. As we go through those ideas in this part of the book, you'll see it. And I know that Ralph was very close to Sandy Beach, and it reminds me of that we all hear that halt thing from Treatment, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And Sandy goes, I just had this great meal. I'm surrounded by people I love. I had a great night's sleep last night, and I want to drink. So it's like, that doesn't apply here to me. This hungry, angry, lonely, there's much more to it than that. So going through this, I'm asking myself these questions because Bill drank to connect. He drank because he was alone. He drank when it was sunny. He drank when it was raining, right? So those are the questions. Should I continue on from there?
Continue. Yep.
Okay. One of the things that I do with people I work with, first part here is to go through all the places Bill has trouble with drinking. My book is highlighted over and over again. The first one is he nearly failed his law exam. Just as a backstory, when you go to Bill's story at his home at Stepping Stones, you'll see all the letters he wrote to Lois while he was fighting that war. He was in his early 20s and he was already overshooting the mark all the time. And those letters are like, Lois, I love you. I miss you. I got to stop drinking. That's what they basically said. So here it is. By the time I completed the course, I knew law was not for me. By the way, Yale offered Bill an honorary law degree, and he turned it down. Okay? The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. So not only is the grandiosity here, but Bill is a materialist. And like we all know, puke smells the same in a Mercedes. Bill could, if we had told Bill that back then, I think he would have got it. But I don't think he understood it right at that moment. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, because I've worked in phone rooms like, the Wolf of Wall Street, it's littered with alcoholics because of this grandiosity and this need to get the next deal. And Bill had that type of personality, what we call a type A personality. I commenced to forge a weapon that would one day turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000, went to certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. By the way, at that time, gas was like 19 cents a gallon. So when Bill paid $350 to get into Towns Hospital, that was like the equivalent of $6,000 at that time. So that's just an example of what the currency ratio was. It went to certain securities, then cheap and unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would one day have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements. But my wife and I decided to go anyway. This is like this renegade, like kind of compulsive behavior, the type A personality. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. Ralph, do you want to keep going?
Sure.
We'll do a paragraph at a time.
We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle. The sidecar was stuffed with a tent, blankets, and a change of clothes and 3 huge volumes of financial reference services. And you see pictures of those on different clubhouse walls. And just out of curiosity, Lois did most of the driving, by the way, but the pictures show Bill in the driver's seat. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had some success at speculation, so had little money, but once we worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern state in a year. At the end, my reports to Wall Street procured a position and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with profits of several $1,000s for the year. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. That's what Adam's talking about with the big shotism, starting to feel like he's somebody. My judgment and ideas were followed by the many of tunes of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drinking was taking on a more important and exhilarating part of my life. Here you start to see the progression of the drinking. There was loud talk in the jazz places. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers would scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. It's a question mark too. Did that happen to you? I know it happened to me. I started drinking with the friends I went to school with. Then they didn't really drink like I drank, so I would drink with this group. Then I would drink with this group. Whoever was drinking like I was drinking, I was drinking. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuous all day and almost every night. The remorselessness of my friends was terminated in a row. I became a lone wolf. Here, his disease is really taking a hold of him. People are starting to, worry about him, and he's just like becoming that guy. And I identify with this because my friends that I grew up with, that I drank with, that all were probably heavy drinkers or problem drinkers, were able to stop, control, or moderate. But when I started drinking more and more and more, when I read the story, It gave words to how I felt and how I acted. There were many unhappy scenes in my home. I could say that. There were no real infidelity for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by my extreme drunkenness, question mark, kept me out of those scrapes. Adam, why don't you recap that?
Yeah, again, this is where I ask the questions, like that first one where you see that I nearly failed my law course. I'm starting to look at the consequences of Bill's drinking. I'm starting to look at the consequences of my drinking. And, we talk about fun with problems, just problems. Another way to look at it is magic, medicine, misery. You're going to hear the medicine part in a minute where he says that liquor ceased to be a luxury and becomes a necessity. You're going to see that piece in here. But going through these things, that's a huge piece here. That thing where he forges the weapon that will later cut him to pieces. It's the weapon of money and liquor, of grandiosity and liquor. A lot of us have some other kind of what we call get down behavior that goes along with our drinking and using. And those things somehow combine to create this almost like dance of death with us. And a lot of times we can't let go of one behavior without the other. For writers, they can't drink and write. Like that's the only way they can do it because they lose their creativity. For other people, it's talking to people. It gives them this illusion that their life is manageable. There's a combination of things that happens. And eventually I'll start to see that, usually later in my recovery. Going back to that next piece where Ralph just left off, did my drinking assume more serious proportions? Like I would just drink on the weekends, right? Then I started drinking on Thursday night. Then I only drank on days that begin with T, like today and tomorrow. Sound familiar? Right? That kind of thing. And it continued all day and every night. So he's starting to become an around-the-clock drinker, all right? His friends are dropping off, right? And he's starting to become, like he says, a lone wolf, okay? How many unhappy scenes were there in their fancy apartment? This is like the beginning of his decline. This is when he's still got the stuff, and that allows him to justify, minimize, and rationalize his drinking. Again, all the things that we talk about in our own drinking, you start to see in Bill's drinking. He's justifying it. He's minimizing it. He's combining this behavior of speculation and money with his drinking. It's very interesting because you'll see it. He says, and so on. There'd been no real infidelity. We know that Bill, had other issues in that area, which I have no judgment about. But shall I continue, Ralph?
Go ahead.
1929, I contracted golf fever. At once we went to the country. My wife to applaud while I started to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster. There it is again. That, a lot of my friends play golf because you can drink and drive at the same time. That's one place where we can do it. That's why we do it. Okay. I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Now you're starting to see the physical effects of Bill's drinking. This is the first time you start to see the physical. When it says magic, medicine, misery, now he's getting into it. And here it is. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. Okay? It was fun to carry him around the exclusive golf course, which had inspired such awe in me and a lad. I don't have that, but that's on that document where it tells you which golf course that was. For some people that like to know stuff like that. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees on the well-to-do and us that live in Southern California. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. Okay? So Bill is still using this thing about success as a way to justify his drinking. You see, he hasn't hit the kind of bottom that he has to hit yet. Ralph?
And it's funny because you see all the I's, I, like Big Shotism, I. Abruptly, in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days in the Inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to the brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ 32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported of men jumping from their death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back into the bar. That's when messed up stuff happens. Do we just say F it and just continue doing what we're doing? My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. The next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left, and I thought I'd better go to Canada. By the following spring, we're living our accustomed lifestyle. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helen for me. And for those of you who don't know, Napoleon was the emperor for 10 years in France. He was, they captured him and they put him on the island of Elba. He escaped and he took over again, and then they put him back on St. Helen, which is off the coast of Africa, and that's where he died like 10 years later of cancer. So when he's saying this, I returned, he's thinking that he still had control, that there was, he was back in control, that he wasn't going to lose control again like Napoleon did. That's the reference there with that. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time, we stayed broke. And here you start to see the real progression. He's becoming pretty much unemployable. He gets these opportunities and then only to lose them. And when I read this, I had a similar opportunity happen to me. I was in Florida. I screwed up. I lost everything. And some guy I met, he gave me an opportunity working on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Wow. And I went up there, and a short time later, my friend let me go, for stupid stuff. So when I read this book, I read it as if it's like, did this happen to me? And I'm sober almost 20 years, and I still get to have this step one experience, because I know that on my own, I can't control the amount of alcohol when I drink. And on my own, I can't stop. I can't stay stopped. I know that it's not me. I don't wake up every day and make a decision not to drink. That problem's been removed from doing this work. It's not about trying to control anymore. Adam?
Yeah, this is really, this section right here, when it says he went back to the bar, if you really look at it, all of a sudden it's really clear that that was Bill's solution. Anyone else would have maybe gone back and done some paperwork and tried to figure out how they could salvage their finances, or, you know what I mean, get their assets together. Bill went back to the bar. That was his answer. So you can see, and I write, this is Bill's solution right here. And this is one of the things that is the most significant thing. It says, tomorrow's another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. That is one of the most powerful things that tells you what Bill's relationship with alcohol was. Alcohol, by the AMA's definition, is a depressant. 9 out of 10 people, they have a couple drinks, and the first thing they say is, oh my gosh, I'm feeling it. I got to work tomorrow. I have a couple drinks and I want to get married. I have a couple drinks and I want to go to Vegas tonight. I have a couple drinks. I'm trying to find the car keys I hid for myself before the first drink. See, alcohol creates the illusion that my life is manageable. My good friend Mickey B, he's got a girlfriend, and she says when she drinks, she becomes wittier, tittier, and prettier. And I don't know what the male equivalent of that is. I know it sounds a little sexist, but it's like when I drank, it gave me the illusion that anything was possible. It gave me the courage to go and cross that dance floor and ask that pretty girl to dance. It gave me the guts to go after that big job. Alcohol gave me an illusion that my life was manageable. And that is something, when he says that fierce old determination to win came back, that's because alcohol did something for Bill, if you're new, that overshadowed anything it was doing to him. And if you're new, or you're an Al-Anon, or maybe not an alcoholic, this is what normal people don't understand about alcoholism, that alcoholism does something for us that is very unusual. And for a lot of people that have the phenomenon of craving, like we were talking about, they may have the phenomenon of craving, but once they stop drinking, they don't really have to do as much work as some of us do. In other words, I'm going to have to develop that fierce determination to win without alcohol. I'm going to have to develop, like they say, what you can conceive and believe you can achieve. Between those three things, there's a thing called faith, and there's a thing called footwork. And alcohol gives me the faith that anything is possible. The problem is I can't do the footwork. When I get sober, I can do the footwork, but I don't believe in myself anymore. And that's why Bill drank. So that's a really, really powerful thing. This guy's name was Dick Johnson, the guy that lived in Canada. I just happen to have that because I hang out with these AA historians in my book study. And that's as much as I said. This time he stayed broke. Bill actually becomes pretty much homeless, after this. So, Ralph, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, he actually didn't have keys to his own place until many years into recovery. Many years in recovery. We went to live with my parents. Ugh, that happened to me several times. I found the job that I lost as a result of brawl with the taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I would to have any real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work for a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became an unwelcome hang-outer at the brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net me a few $100s, and I would pay my bills in bars and delicatessens. It's funny with me, I even relate to that. Like, I would pay my bar tab, but my car payment, maybe not, you know. Then I went on endlessly, and I began to awaken very early in the morning, shaking valiantly. A tumbler full gin, followed by a half a dozen beers. A dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast at all. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So here you start to physically being addicted to alcohol, awaking violently. Bathtub gin, it's like rubbing alcohol basically. And you see the progression where now he physically has to drink alcohol. And, it's such a powerful delusion that we're under that he still thinks he can control it. That he still thought he could control the situation. And I know for me that I had periods of sobriety where I said, I'm just not going to drink. I'm going to take a break, that I really thought I was in control. And then boom, all of a sudden, taking a drink seems like the greatest idea in the world. Adam, why don't you tell them the story about you got two people in the drunk tank, an alcoholic and non-alcoholic. The mind is so different. Why don't you tell them the two different mindsets going on?
Oh yeah, you got a drunk and a problem drinker in a drunk tank for drunk driving, and they got two completely different philosophies. The real alcoholic and the problem drinker. The problem drinker's on one side of the cell thinking, why did I drink so much last night? I knew I shouldn't have drank so much. Real alcoholics on the other side of the cell thinking, why did I take Interstate 10? Completely different way to look at it. And that really isn't, it is humorous, but I think it's a lot deeper than that. I go through all these parts that we're talking about that Ralph just went through. That part about the brawl with the taxi driver, that's the anger. That's one of the things that you see with Bill. But you're looking at the emotional immaturity there and the sensitivity. Remember those ideas: grandiose, sensitive, immature, and omnipotent. We're going to see the omnipotence later. Bill was violently anti-religious, and we're going to see that as it comes along. But this is his immaturity and his sensitivity with the taxi driver. Again, was hardly to draw a sober breath. Does anybody remember that? When I work with new people, I'm asking them that question. I'm asking them how many times, coming home to find him drunk. The definition of a functioning alcoholic to me is an alcoholic that lives with someone that works. So that's what Bill is now. Bill's living with, his wife's working at a department store, and he's basically stealing money out of her purse. Imagine how humiliating that's got to be for a guy. A guy that had so much hope for himself. Bill really did have, he had it going on. He was around some very interesting people, and he really had a lot. He came from a pretty good family. It's heartbreaking to watch what happened to Bill. So there it is. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. Top of page 5. That's where the medicine part is. Magic, medicine, misery. That's the progression of alcoholism. So now it's a necessity. Okay? This went on endlessly. I began to wake up early in the morning shaking. There's the physical component. He's got the DTs. Have you ever had the DTs? Have you ever used liquor as medicine? A lot of people that have severe emotional and mental disorders, like in chapter 5, they stay in the medicinal part of alcoholism for years. Some of them will tell you they never enjoyed their drinking. They only used it as medicine. They used it to help them with the emotional pain. I love drinking. Drinking was I drank with enthusiasm. But there are people with grave emotional and mental disorders, and you're going to see it here, that they drank because it was medicine for them. Okay? So going all through that, all of that is highlighted. It went on endlessly. I began to wake up in the morning. Was I a morning drinker? Okay? Did I still think I could control the situation? Top of the first paragraph on 5. There's Bill's need continually to control and enjoy his drinking. Despite all of the havoc we've already read that liquor has caused Bill, he's still trying to control it. There's guys on Skid Row tonight with livers that are extended, and they still think that it's bad luck. They still think it's because they took Interstate 10. They still think it's because they had an abusive parent. They still can't see these simple ideas that we're looking at. And this is the great one. This is when they say there's always a trap door at your bottom. This next paragraph, he says, gradually things got worse. How could they get worse? I mean, it was pretty bad, right? The house was taken away by the mortgage holder. Now he really is homeless. My mother-in-law died, and my wife and father became very ill. If you're in Al-Anon, you know how they say God protects kids and drunks? What you'll see with the system, the family system of alcoholism, is it seems like everyone around us starts to get sick. All the people that love us. And we don't even recognize it because I was so selfish and so centered. My same thing with my family. I destroyed my mom's and dad's marriage. Even though they stayed together, I destroyed it and I couldn't see it. You want to jump into the next one, or should I continue, Ralph?
Continue.
Okay. There's one thing worse in AA for a newcomer than bad luck. And you know what it is? Good luck. So I'm going to just say really quick. I go to a men's group with 400 guys, and a guy gets up and he says, oh, my wife broke my nose with a frying pan when I was drunk. He gets a standing ovation. And then he'll say, oh, I wrecked another car and got it drunk driving. He'll get another standing ovation. And then he'll say, and I got a promotion at work. And everyone will go, oh, no. And this is why. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932. And I had somehow formed a group to buy. So collectively, Bill had got a bunch of people involved in a cooperative effort to buy a group of stocks. He was to share generously in the profit. Okay? And there it is. I highlight this. I went on a prodigious bender, and the chances vanished. So you can see what Bill did. Another great opportunity. He got the first, it's just like getting the first paycheck at this fantastic job and not showing up on Monday. Sound familiar? How many of us have done that? You know, I'm drunk on my calculus exam. I can't even see the page. And everything in my career depends on me passing that exam. I woke up. This had to be stopped, right? So he's talking. This is like self-talk. He's saying, I got to stop. I saw I could not take as much as one drink. Remember that feeling if you're new, where you're swearing off forever, with or without a solemn oath? That's what Bill's doing right here if you're new. We all did that. If anyone knows what it means to drink against their will, this is where it's starting to happen. I was through forever. Before then, I'd written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed this time I meant business, and so do I. That's like me in like treatment center 28, where everyone gets their hopes up again. And I'm really like enthusiastic about recovery. And then I've let them all down again. That's what Bill's feeling right now. It's heartbreaking. Ralph, read the next line.
Really, really seeing the progression here. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk.
Oh, it's crushing.
There had been no fight. Where had there been in my high resolve? And when I read this, my sponsor, I remember my family having these backroom talks about, you know, what's going on with their kid? Like, what is going on with their oldest son? Like, why does this keep happening? And I can remember, you know, doing so good and them starting to see the worst thing that I give them, which is false hope. You know, they see that I'm doing good. They have these conversations like, yeah, he's here. He's doing good. You know, he's working. You know, his car's registered, you know, and I'm giving him false hope. And then shortly I come home drunk 2 days later, and they open up the room to the cellar, this little room now that I'm moved back home in, and they just look at me and they say, what happened? And I got no answers. And that's what's happening with Bill here now. It's all pointless and academic, you know, to know that I can't drink unless I do something about it. Shortly afterward, I came, where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. I hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed being just that. And now he's experiencing the true powerlessness, saying to Lois and saying to myself and writing these pieces of paper, I'm never going to do this again, and meaning it, but he lacks the power. He lacks the power. And Adam and I both work with hundreds of guys, and when they tell us that, listen, I'm never doing this again, I believe that they believe that, but they don't understand that they're really powerless. They say don't drink no matter what. I'm the type of guy that drinks no matter what. I drink no matter what. And here we're really starting to experience it. And there's a bunch of questions that you could ask yourself, or working with a new person. Did this happen to me? Were you crazy? Someone pushed a drink my way. One day I wasn't drinking. Next thing I know, I have a beer in my hand. I'm like, what am I doing? I got to be someplace in a few hours. And then I seemingly changed my mind, because once this craving takes over my body, my mind is no longer in charge. It's my body physically saying, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I think I changed my mind. I think, well, Adam showed up. Let me have a drink with him. Or the game's on. Let me think about, I'll leave after the game. He's really experiencing the true powerlessness here in this part. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. And here he's using willpower. And how many of you have tried to use willpower? I know I did. Some time passed, and I began to replace my cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into the cafe to telephone a friend. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened again. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. And it's all willpower. It's all about illusion of thinking that next time it's going to be different. He's under a delusion that he still can control and enjoy it. But I might as well get good and drunk then. And I did. And those are all question marks that we write. I have in my book that when I'm reading with someone, I stop and ask them, did this happen to you? Did this experience you? And I think it's important when I'm working with a new guy to share some of my qualifications so they know that we're both the real alcoholic, and I'm qualifying them. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, somehow I never thought I would enjoy doing this, but reading this to a new person, sitting down with him and going through these questions and looking at all of page 5, you're starting to look at Bill's consequences, and you're looking at this transition of self-knowledge and self-will, like where Bill's attempt at control all the way through this. And you're starting to see what he says in working with others. By the way, when I take the book and I do prayers, promises, warnings, and directions with 4 highlighters, there's 39 specific directions in working with others. And just as a point of reference, he says, explain the baffling feature of alcoholism. And this is the baffling feature with all this education, all of this knowledge. When I hear don't drink no matter what, I feel like somebody hasn't really either read this or I'm not talking to someone that's like me. What I have to hear in my head is go to meetings no matter what, work steps no matter what, maintain commitments no matter what, take other people through this process so I can stay clear on this feature of alcoholism. But Bill can't bring into his consciousness. I know we've all heard it and we know where it comes from, and we're going to get to that later. But you're starting to see this, that Bill cannot, in and of himself, keep himself sober. He can't stay stopped on his own. And that's something when I'm working with a new guy, he's going to start to get to the point where he's starting to realize that he's doomed. That if he does not find another solution, he's going to have a mind that's going to continue to take him back to drinking. It's a death sentence for a lot of us. If you're new and you have what I have, what Ralph's talking about, so he told himself he'd manage better. And then we're going to go to the next one. All of this has to do, again, with the consequences and the damage caused by Bill's drinking. The horror and remorse and hopelessness the next day are unforgettable. Sound familiar? Have you ever woke up in the morning and said, I wish I drank last night? Never. But I've woke up a million times saying, I can't believe I did it again. I am so ashamed. And then, you don't want to wake up whoever you're with, and you just Whatever, I'm just kidding. The horror and remorse of the next day are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. Bill's almost like giving up. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. Sounds like anxiety. Okay? I hardly dare cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck. Sound familiar? It was scarcely daylight. Okay? An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My wreathing nerves were stilled at last. So that's, again, the DTs. You're seeing the physical component of the addiction to alcohol. Okay? A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell with, so had I. He said, the market would recover, but I wouldn't. It's horrible. It's horrible. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? Right? This is what we just read in the doctor's opinion, the ultimate sacrifice, right? The supreme sacrifice. This is where Bill is now. He's thinking he wants to kill himself. I wish that every day. I prayed every day that God would take me. And, I'm here. No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix it. There it is again. I have written under that solution. Because, see, it's Bill's solution. Why kill yourself when you can get good and drunk? 2 bottles and oblivion. So all of that's highlighted. Everywhere where Bill has trouble with alcohol, if you're new, again, using the big book as a diagnostic tool and a kind of interface between you and a new person. Everywhere where you see trouble with alcohol, I would highlight that and then share that with a new person in what we call a Socratic method, where you're asking him whether he relates to that and what his experience was with that idea. So did I think that liquor would fix this problem? And there it is. Ralph?
And if you go, and the doctor's opinion, it talks about, to them, their alcohol seems like the only normal one. Now Bill's drinking has progressed where that's normal for him. It's normal to have to wake up and drink. It's normal for him to have to start hiding bottles. It's normal for him to get an opportunity and lose it. It just becomes like normal. But the fierceness in him is starting to get, alcohol is starting to beat him into beat him up pretty good here. It's like, my sponsor used to say, it's like taking a knife to a gunfight. When you go up against alcoholism with willpower. And up until this point, that's what he's been using. And my mind raced uncontrollably in the morning. The fear of like, what did I do? Oh my God, I spent all this money, or oh my God, she's going to find out this or whatever. All this fear inside of me. So this is me. I could definitely relate to all this different stuff. So we're at the mind and body, right?
Yes, sir.
The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for my mind endured the agony for 2 more years. Sometime I stole from my wife's slender purse. Then in the morning, terror and madness were on me. I again swayed dizzy before an open window in the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for being a weakling. There were flights from the city and the country to back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night with the physical and mental torture were so hellish that I feared I would burst through my window sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag the mattress to the lower floor, lest I drink. A doctor came in with heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. There's drugs and alcohol mixed. This combination landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking. I was 40 pounds underweight. He's getting caught up here really bad. Now he's abusing, medicine that's being prescribed to him. And you could see that sometimes in those things, he's still having these moments, like with this flight from the country and back. He's still having these little dry spouts, but with the drinking is taking a more serious part in his life, where Lois really, if you read some of the history books, she really had to watch him 24/7, and he sometimes would disappear for like a day or two, and somebody would bring him home. They'd bring him home beat up. Sometimes she found him on the stairs outside the house. It's getting really bad here for Bill. My brother-in-law was a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. That's Charlottetown's hospital. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained, though he had certainly been selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, both bodily and mentally. And that's highlighted, again, we're talking about Dr. Silkworth, who we talk about in the second and third week. It relieved me somewhat to learn that alcoholics is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it has often remained strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding for myself now, I feared and high hope for 3 or 4 months to goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. That's all highlighted, the self-knowledge part, because now Bill is starting to think that, okay, I just can't drink. You know, the doctor told him he has a problem. He's thinking that he still can control it. And I've experienced this, you know, myself saying I'm done. I'm going to quit forever, and I'm just not going to do it. It's those people that I'm hanging out with. I'm not going to hang out with those people anymore. I started hanging out with different people. But here the progression is on. The mental obsession is on him so bad. When I read Bill's story, the other version, it talks about the strange mental obsession that out of the blue, the thoughts of drinking would just take over and would be on him in a minute. But it was not for the fateful day when I came home when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This is the second time. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and desperating wife informed me that it would be the end with heart failure and during the delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. Adam?
Yeah, just recapping the bottom of page 6. I asked them, you know, that thing about the terror and the madness were on him. It's like the craving. He cannot outthink this thing. He has the compulsion so powerfully. And if you relate to that, ask yourself what that's like, because it's just one piece in it. Reading this and understanding the next 2 or 3 paragraphs till the middle of page 7, Bill's starting to get an idea about the phenomenon of craving, okay? Silkworth explains the phenomenon of craving to Bill, but see, that was still not enough. Having that piece is only good for a certain type of alcoholic, the type that's normal in every respect except the effect produced by alcohol, that normal, able-friendly type. Once he learns that he has a phenomenon of craving, that seems to be enough for him. And you'll hear him, you know, when you get hit by a train, it's not the caboose that kills you, it's the engine. Once he discovers that piece, he never takes the first drink again. But see, Bill is going to get the solution later. The spiritual malady, which is the thing that comes from young to Ebby to him, that's going to be the next piece. That's coming in a couple of pages. So this is still not enough. But going through this and knowing that this is kind of the chronological order of him going to treatment the first time. Now he's gone the second time. We are out of time, by the way, talking about time. We are going to resume this next week. Next week, Bill's story, by the way, is divided into 2 halves. It's 16 pages. The first half of his decline, which we're just about to hit the threshold. And then the next 8 pages is going to be all of the fundamental pieces of Alcoholics Anonymous are going to be in place in the second half of Bill's story. It is even more powerful. If you've related to any of the hopelessness of Bill, I mean, I cringe when I think about like how bad he was. I went through 28 treatment centers. He only went through 3, but still, it's the willfulness. And if you're new, that willfulness, I hope, will become willingness. We didn't acknowledge the host and the 7th tradition. I don't know if you guys want to put that up on the screen at the end, but we're also going to do that while if we can, ask some questions. Ralph, do you have anything else to say?
No, I was just going to read the 7th tradition, but this group, like many other groups, is self-supporting, and they've been contributing to the local area in Canada. And in the chat is the 7th tradition. So if you can, if you could give, please give. It goes to, keeping AA going. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you.
Any questions?
Anybody relate to any of this? Good.
Oh, Bob D from Detroit. There you go, Bob. Oh, that's funny. I just said your name and you put your hand up. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I love the pace you guys are going at. I mean, this is the critical part of the whole thing, and I just absolutely love, and I can connect with everything you guys are talking about. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know both you guys are so busy. This is like perfect way to end the year and start a new year. Thanks, guys.